were, at least at the time, exploring how to start their own company or joining a slightly early stage company.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another week's episode of Rising Giants with your hosts Max and Dom. Today on the podcast we have Ollie Forsyth. He is an ex-VC working with Draper, Antler. He's also the founder of New Economies Newsletter that now has over 50,000 subscribers, talks about emerging trends and emerging economies. Ollie, great to have you on. How are you doing this morning?
Max, Dom, great to see you both and great to be here. Thank you so much.
So, how we like to begin most of our podcasts, just like talk about your early journey, talk about your first 20 years on planet Earth, and you know when you started expanding into what you're doing now.
Yeah. So I've always loved like the entrepreneurial career, right? And actually, for the listeners listening, wherever you are in the world, Max and I actually go back a long way. I think we've known each other about 15 years, give or take. So just a few years. And basically, yeah, I started my first company when I was 13, which was a e-commerce website for teenagers. So I loved making money like when I was really young. First of all, I actually charged my mom and dad a cup of tea in the morning. 20 pence a cup, like 30 cents, right, for US listeners. That was like great. And then, yeah, when I was like 13, I created this e-commerce platform, which basically was how do mums, dads, like family, relatives find the perfect gift for their son and daughter. And it was a great name, Ollie's Shop. Couldn't think of anything more original. And yeah, that did really well. Like I think in the first 6 months of memory, it was like £20,000 turnover, so like $25,000. And maybe like $16,000 in profit in 6 months when I was 13. And it was very simple, like build really good relationships with suppliers in China and then get them to send you like free stuff or like very heavily discounted stuff and then you upsell it. Anyway, of course, like when you're 13, like the media love to talk about young entrepreneurs, and that's how I started building a bit of a personal brand in the space. Had a couple hundred like publications writing about the story. It wasn't that amazing to be honest, but over the years, hopefully like it's progressed a little bit. And then yeah, I've done a bunch of stuff. Like when I was 16, I did like an entrepreneurs magazine for teenagers, which has actually come full circle, which we'll get back to in a minute. And that was really like how do we inspire the next generation to start companies. And yeah, when I was 19, 20, I've always really loved like getting involved in VC, talking to like proper founders. And by then I left school at 16 with no qualifications. But when you're kind of 18, 19, go on 20, that's when you start hopefully getting your like first professional job. And I was running a podcast at the time, and one of the partners at a VC I interviewed, and he said, "Oh, we're actually looking for someone of your caliber to come and like run our community, run our portfolio, and so on and so on." And that's how I got into VC. It was a bit lucky, but also maybe we can go into some of the ways how the VC industry can improve. But essentially, it was done through like who you know, right? And yeah, that got me starting at Draper Esprit, which is now Molten Ventures, which is a late stage fund investing in European tech companies. I had a great time there, met some amazing people, built a pretty good network. And then Antler was starting to open in London. And how I actually got introduced to Antler was I went to their first demo day in London. This must have been June 2020, give or take. And to see the founder of Antler was there, and Draper Esprit Molten Ventures. We were also investing in funds, and I introduced Antler to Draper. Draper's then went on to invest in multiple of the Antler funds, and I also joined Antler afterwards. And yeah, had a great time. I was at Antler for 3.5 years, just over. And I joined as a early employee. We were 50 people when I joined. 200 companies and I think 7 offices. And then when I left in May this year, we had 1,200 companies, 30 offices, and 1,200 companies.
And rewinding back a little bit, talk to us because you said sort of the way that you got into VC was you having your own podcast and like kind of that network that you had. Maybe just talk to us about what it was like starting the Makers podcast. You did over 60 or 60 or so episodes. You interviewed people like Mark Randolph from Netflix. You had Servants Cable from the Lib Dems. You had Tom Bloomfield of Monzo. And the list goes on. Like how did you do that? Like what was that like? I mean,
Yeah,
you were sort of roughly 20 years old at the time.
I was.
Like just
Yeah.
being able to find those people and get them on the podcast.
Hustle. It's very simple. Like people think it's really complicated to email these people. It's not. First name at company email website domain.com or whatever the domain is. Very simple. And I said to these people, look, we've got a whole caliber of like people who've been on the podcast and who are coming on. By this point, we were getting like 20,000 maybe listeners a week. And the one that actually really set it for me was Mark Randolph, the co-founder of Netflix. That was our most popular, and I managed to get the first interview, something along the lines of like when he released his book. And everyone was like, "Oh wow, Netflix co-founder." That really set the scene. And then afterwards, you have another big name, then another big name. And I honestly think if anyone's starting like a media company podcast, once you've got your first 5 or 6 big names, the rest will follow. I think it's quite easy. It just takes time, and it grew really nicely. Yeah.
Yeah, it is kind of similar with Dom and I a bit. In Cambodia when we started out with Rising Giants, it was really just like convincing those first 5 to 10 people, or like as you say, like kind of like bigger names, and then the rest would, as long as you keep the consistency and the quality up, the rest will be happy to then come. And we're also going through that now with like as we try and do more like regional podcasts, we're having to like reintroduce ourselves and pitch ourselves, but yeah, as you say, you just create that
Exactly.
momentum and you keep pushing.
Yeah, and I think what you guys do is also amazing. But also you have to have that relationship with your listeners. I found, just be like you don't want to be too over the top. You don't want to be like too negative. You want to keep it very free flowing, almost like a television interview, right? That's how I think of it. And if you just have a really nice, like soft, gentle, and open dialogue, which opens and can relate to your audience, then I think that's what makes a great listen. Now there are a lot more podcasts out there, but you guys are doing a great job. I'm a weekly fan, so I think I was your first.
We really appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of podcasts out there. What I will say is, like, I don't think there are that many, focused on Southeast Asia, right? There's probably like maybe 5 to 10 that we're aware of that, like, just focus on talking to people in this region.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a good sort of segue into your move to Asia. And you said so you joined Antler in London, or you met them in London, and then what was it like, kind of, then being able to travel with them
Yeah.
and explore new countries.
That was amazing. Like and it's amazing. The culture there, and anyone who works there or who's starting a company there, like definitely recommend it. There's the culture like is so amazing. We're all very close, and especially like in the early days, it was you work hard, but you are left to your own devices, which is great. And it fitted my way of working. Anyway, from the time I was there, I basically spent very little time in London, and I didn't have to be in London. So I worked on our global team, so the global team could be based anywhere. So I spent like 3 or 4 months in America, Austin, Colorado, San Francisco, and New York. That was super cool. All of like Scandinavia, a lot of places in Europe. But I always said like I was going to move to Asia at some point. So my former manager said, "Come and have a catch up with me in South Korea." I think I was in like Sweden at the time. Bit of a long way to go for an in-person catch up. Anyway, I knew that was my ticket out. So I lived in South Korea for a bit. That was amazing. Lived in like Vietnam, been to like Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore. Japan, and Taiwan, and just like absolutely loved it. And then I came to Thailand, where I now live for the last few years. I just loved it. Like what I really love, to be honest, is it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, what job you have, how much money you earn, like all of that stuff that all of us back in Europe, especially in the UK, really care about. No one cares here. And also, as a foreigner, you're very well respected. No one like disrespects you. And hopefully, I'll be here for the future.
That's great. I think, I mean, yeah, in general, like there is this slightly more obsession with like status games, right?
Yeah,
In the UK and other countries, but like in this part of the world, yeah, people are definitely a little bit more relaxed and
yeah,
not going to sort of judge as much in
yeah,
general, for
yeah,
sure. And
exactly.
as you say, being a foreigner coming in, like that there is still stuff you can add value on, right? And so there are some. I mean, some countries more welcoming than others, right? But yeah, the parts of the world that we're in, like I think it's generally like a win-win relationship, right?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
same to maybe when you guys came to Cambodia, or especially Max, when you moved there and maybe Dawn in the future, is like, yeah, you are coming to a new country, but also from an international mindset point of view, you can add so much to the ecosystem, different perspectives, and so on. Thailand, to give you an idea, there are only 180 Taipei startups which have received funding here ever. That's it. Like compared to Singapore or the UK, that's what they probably have. What maybe every few days, at least every week, especially in the UK. And it's very small. Everyone knows each other. But what I personally really like from a personal point of view, and like in like my private life, is like you can walk around at 2 o'clock in the morning, no one's gonna harm you. Whereas if you're in London, those who've read the news now, like it's not the safest place to be.
Yeah, I was actually looking at some data the other day, and the UK has three of the five most dangerous cities in Europe.
Wow.
Yeah.
I also read this, so I read something similar. So to give you an idea, I mean, there is no crime really in Thailand.
Mm.
Very, very little. In the UK, last year alone, um, something like 86,000 phones were stolen in London alone. Now, my quick maths, that's a lot every day. Um, Something like 3,500 to 4,000 Range Rovers now in London. You can't get a Range Rover insured in London anymore. And I'm just like, I had enough, honestly. Like, maybe I lived in London for 8.5 years, and then after that, I was like, I want a new life, and Thailand is my new life.
Okay. And okay, tell us about what you're up to today. What is the main focus? Tell us about new economies and
Yeah.
your transition. Well, I mean, you did 3 years with Antler, and sort of now your transition to being a founder yourself. Well, you're a
Yeah.
founder again, basically. Yeah.
So after my like just over 3.5 years at Antler, it was meeting so many amazing founders. But one of the things I did quite frequently was um, write, interesting insights into what's the latest trends happening in tech. And I was gathering all this information in my head from meeting a lot of VCs, meeting a lot of founders, really also like traveling a lot. You're getting a global perspective. And to me, it was always when you're working in the VC industry, you typically know the latest technology trends, maybe 6 to 12 months before anyone else does. And when I got thinking about what to do next, why should that be the case? So, New Economies Newsletter talks about the latest technology trends shaping our world. And that's anything from like the aging population, consumer, the creator economy, AI is a big focus for us right now for obvious reasons, and a bunch of others. So we have about just over 50,000 subscribers now. We get a new subscriber every 9 minutes, 35 seconds. And for us is from just being like a content creator, how do we just be the best at what we do? And if you can, things you can do other things in the future. Um, and so right now is a weekly newsletter. We're looking to see how do we slightly increase that. What are the we're building a couple of SaaS products along the side as well, which we can sell to VCs and accelerators, maybe consulting firms and so on. And the focus is just being the best and producing the best content that could be.
And what's the format of the newsletter, just to give the listeners an idea
Yeah.
of what they would be coming across if they were a first time reader?
Yeah, so you should be able to read all of our newsletters within 5 to 10 minutes. Is always focusing on one, each week is focusing on one sector or one domain. So, for example, last week we did one on AI tools within the workplace. We mapped out all of the AI tools you can use in the workplace and how you can use them and why you should be using them. For example, another one, 2 or 3 weeks ago, we did one on the aging population. Aging population is obviously like a big thing right now. There are more people getting old versus having new babies. So why is that happening? Mapping out like all the countries which are getting a positive and maybe slightly facing a few challenges. And for us, like we just want to give it all of our readers. This is exactly what's happening in the industry. This is how it's changing. This is how it will change in the future. This is what to look at. And if you can have those weekly like digests, then hopefully like that provides a ton of value. And yeah, there are some really cool things that we can do in the future, but TPC.
Yeah, to be fair. It's funny, the aging population is a conversation that I think Max and I have at least once a week. Um, every
Yeah,
now and then I'll get a tweet from or like a tweet from Max that Max will send over, and it's always about something that's going on in terms of how we are seriously in some trouble. And today, whenever I see friends around, I'm like, "You guys think you're having some issues? Let me tell you about the
yeah,
aging population in the world. Like
yeah,
this is we're really as a society
yeah.
heading in the wrong direction."
Yeah, exactly. Actually, any of our readers should check it out. It's become one of our most popular posts so far. But also, like for content creators who are listening to your audience, there's so much more like that goes into it. So for us, like within the first 30 minutes to 1 hour is absolutely crucial, like to make this thing go viral. If we haven't had at least 10 to 15,000 people like reading the post within 12 hours, we know it's not going to go viral. But typically, so far, all of our posts have had at least that. Um, and you're thinking all the posts we think about how do you build a product and how do you build a startup. So how do you make it to the biggest and the best? And that's everything from like which media publications do we get involved? Who do we have as like contributors? All of the startups who are being featured. How do we go around like including them so then they start sharing it on their channels? Um, what happens if, for example, and this always happens, which we can support, but we can't always achieve. How do we avoid missing, particular companies that should maybe have been included? How do we make sure like the data sources are, almost as accurate as possible? So there's a lot more that goes into it. It's similar to how you guys probably like think about doing your podcast. But I think as long as you have a really good relationship with your audience, I think they'll like it.
Is there a playbook when you do your releases, or is there a certain formula that goes into it that, as a reader, right, you're only getting the front end of it, but as being the creator, there's an entire front to back process for
Yeah,
putting it together, and like you said, like you mentioned with the release, is there
yeah.
anything that you think about on every release like that?
I would say there are a couple things. So one, like every single newsletter we do, before we send it out, I probably read like 20, 25 times. And even it's like the one tiniest thing can change the entire newsletter. So maybe like, how do you position this sector changing in the future? And by just changing like this one paragraph, it actually makes it so much better. Second, our newsletter goes out on Sundays at this is Bangkok time at 9:53 p.m. It has to be that time, as we know within 12 hours, typically that gets to 20,000 reads. And people get it on a Sunday at 9:53 p.m. The in the US they are 11 hours behind. In Europe they're 5 or 6 hours behind. In Africa, a couple of hours depending on where you are. So like that's where the biggest market is and the biggest audience demographic are going to open the newsletter. Making sure like the design's on point, so we know like pink and blue, grey, that resonates really well with audiences. Anything too bright doesn't. So yeah, there is like a playbook that goes into it. But yeah, we're still new, so I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, and you mentioned that it's very important to understand the relationship that you have with your audience. What are some of the ways that you're able to cultivate that and build and continue to build the newsletter week after week to continue to
Yeah.
improve it?
So I would say one is be like, we're 100% transparent. We're 100% transparent. We try and like disclose as much information as we can on how we're growing, but also like what's happening within, I guess, like the wider economy. Um, Second, it's you have to be I think, very considerate on what are the latest technology trends shaping on what, but also how do you not be too negative or too positive about particular economies. So like we're very like in the middle. We never give like a biased opinion. Um, Third, it's how can you also incentivize your audience members to become part of your journey. So we've actually just turned on paid subscriptions, so people can upgrade and become a paid subscriber, and you get access to like our community, a whole bunch of benefits and so on. And that's how we also generate some revenue. Um, and we're still quite early, but for us, it's if you want to become part of our journey, like hopefully we become one of the number one Substackers publications like in the next few years. Become part of our journey, and we'd love you to be part of it.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Just as a personal question, being on the forefront of all of these technologies and advancements in different areas, you're creating the content, you're distributing it, and making it in a digestible way for readers to be able to understand it. Do you ever take a second to step back and think to yourself, "Wow, we're advancing at a rate that is kind of scary in a way." Do you ever feel like that, or is it more of just the sense of excitement of
I think it's just, yeah.
where we're going?
I think it's just excitement. Like to give you an idea, paid subscribers versus 30 days ago has increased by 3x. We get a month ago, 6 weeks ago, we got a new subscriber every 15 minutes. Now it's every 9 minutes, 35 seconds. By the end of the year, if we get that to every, 6 minutes, give or take, amazing. And then it's just thinking, what can you do in the future? So one idea I had like was new economies. Maybe in the future you could do like new consumer economies, new fintech economies. Like you can start to franchise it or something. There are like a lot of ideas like I'd love to explore at some point, but for now is just completely focus on how do we get to one of the best publications, like especially like in the technology stack. And yeah, there's lots of things I want to do at some point in the future.
That's exciting. That's exciting.
Yeah.
And is it just yourself that's doing the writing, or do you have a team
Yeah.
that supports you?
It's me.
Yeah.
Everything. We will we will bring on somebody at some point. It's just a case of when's the right time. And that's because the writing takes so much time and it's brain overload. You guys probably experience something similar with doing the podcast. You want to ask all these questions, you want to cram so much information in. But if you can have somebody to help you make it much better, how do you make the design so much better? How do you improve the relationship with your like paid subscribers? We have quite a few sponsors now who are interested in partnering with us. We're starting to do reports. Like reports take a ton of time. Yeah, so you will need people at some point. But for now, do as much as you can. I learned this at Handler. Do as much as you can first before having to hire people.
Yeah. Yeah. That
Because
makes
honestly,
sense.
like it's more time, then you got to manage them, then you got to have updates, and you got to have weekly calls. If you can just do as much as you can, like as a by yourself, I think it becomes slightly easier.
Yeah. You really touched on a good point too. When Max and I first started the podcast, whenever we were creating the question sheet for the guests at the very beginning, when we were taking that route, we caught ourselves getting into hour plus long conversations where we wanted to make sure that we went down the list, we were asking all the right questions. When,
Exactly.
as you iterate over time, you come to realize that sending over a few topics or a few questions just to give, the guests an idea of what they're going to expect, but having the free flow conversation is so much more enjoyable on both sides, because that's when you really get into a state of flow, because it's not like there's going to be any hot got you questions. It's more of, two people trying to learn from each other. and that
Exactly.
becomes a lot more natural and a lot more just a lot more comfortable too. And I think that's really, as being a content creator, that's really a good feeling to have once you get to that level of experience. I would say.
Exactly. And then you're starting to, hopefully you're becoming smarter when you're writing on trends. Then you get to meet amazing people like you guys. And that's when you really start to understand, like, okay, maybe these are the 5 or 6 like biggest trends that are shaping our world in the next couple of years. And I'd love to get your guys' opinion, but I think if you become if you in today's world, niche content is so much better. You guys focus on Southeast Asia. Okay, we're slightly more broad on, I guess, like global technology trends. But if you become that niche player, then A is better is slightly easier to win in our markets. Second, you can come become the best. And third, hopefully it makes your audience so much more engaged. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I would say fully aligned there. I think another and also and part of that too is for us uh, we do focus on Southeast Asia, but it's also the overlooked markets or what have traditionally been the overlooked markets that, with Cambodia, Myanmar as well. So it's been a really interesting experience because those are the stories that you can really dive deep into and learn from some really resilient founders, and that's just exciting. That's really
Exactly.
what, at least for yourself, that's what's exciting to learn. On the as you build like brand equity over time too, you do create the network within those markets, which it's just a snowball effect, and a lot of people that are starting out in as a content creator, it's really just having that consistency. And you mentioned the word at the beginning of the show, but really having that hustle to
Yeah.
continue that piece. People don't realize that most podcasts don't go past 10 episodes,
Yeah.
right? There's so much
Exactly.
more that goes into it than you would think.
Exactly. And I think one of the biggest challenges for creators, maybe similar to you guys, or not, it's yes, it's consistency, making sure you don't burn out. A number of my creative friends anyway, like are starting to burn out. But then like I would just say, how do you like just be smarter, be savvy, like all of your previous content you can start to repurpose, for example,
Right.
to at least allow you like a week's breathing room. You can be pretty transparent with your audience if you want to, with kind of what's happening. But I would say, yeah, that's one of the challenges, making sure creators don't burn out.
Yeah.
Is one of the industries I'm really passionate about, the creator economy. I've been covering it for the last 4 years and excited to release something soon within the creator economy space from a content point of view. But I really think like is a really interesting topic to watch and space to watch. And I'm pretty sure all of us in the future, not only will we be creators, but we'll be solopreneurs. With
Mhm.
AI now disrupting like a lot of these industries, if anyone who can, if you can have a small side hustle that's earning a couple $1,000, five, $10,000 a month, whatever it is, you should do it because at some point AI is going to probably affect most of our jobs.
Yeah. That's it's a reality that we're gonna have to accept here in the over the next decade.
Yeah,
Yeah, and also just for the audience to know, Ollie makes fantastic graphs and charts on LinkedIn.
try to.
They're fantastic, especially being able to see all of the companies that are doing great things within the specific subsectors of a major sector. So definitely hop on over to his LinkedIn to check those out. One quick question I wanted to dive a little bit more into was you mentioned burnout and how some of your friends are experiencing that. How do you cope with any of those feelings that come up when when you do something week in and week out, right? It's almost inevitable that a feeling like that could arise, but how are you able to handle it?
Good question. But just before that, you gave me a great plug, so I'll give a good plug to you guys. If anyone who's not subscribed to Rising Giants, you should. So subscribe now, wherever you get your podcasts. Yeah, burnout. I think it's you don't need to work 19 hours a day as a founder. I think that's one thing. It's all about like this hustle culture, working 24/7. What time did you get up? What time did you go to bed? How many customers you have? honestly, in the grand scheme of things, it actually doesn't matter. If you burn out sooner than expected, then it takes a very long time to come back. So for me, like, yes, working like very hard. Saturdays are my day off, so I don't work on those days. I try not to. I did last night, but yesterday just went out with friends, did a bunch of stuff, like had lunch together and all of that. That's really important. So if you can like work super hard during the week and maybe one day the weekends, if you have to, then try to keep it out, but try to just have the one day off where you just don't do very much, or you see friends, or whatever you want to do, whatever you find like your zest in life, right? And I find that that works really well. Bangkok is quite nice. I'm from the UK, if listeners haven't already guessed, where it rains basically 95% of the year. So at least in Bangkok, it's hot all year round, and it's quite a good lifestyle. But all of that doesn't mitigate like working hard and all of this. So yeah, and I think just having really good friends around you. I'm really like I've got maybe 20, 30 like pretty good friends, 5 really close friends like here in Bangkok, who I see most days, and that's cool. And I think it's important just to have a really good network of people, yeah, around you. Otherwise, if you're working, especially these days, if you're working from home and you're not seeing anyone, that would, I don't know about your listeners or you guys, but that would drive me crazy. I am like a very people person. I like to be seeing people every day, talking to a lot of people, learning as well. So just get out there and go and see people, I would say.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, just one area I wanted to jump in and talk about a little bit, because you've had some, you've had like an interesting like observance, right, on the Southeast Asia VC accelerator space. So maybe we could just talk a little bit more about that. Like, what have you seen in terms of like the model in the region? Like, I think we have maybe 100 unicorns in Southeast Asia now. Probably hundreds of VCs. What do you see people getting right, and what do you see people getting wrong?
Okay, so there are two sides. And there are two sides. So you've got the accelerate side and you've got the founder side. Maybe we take that stance. Let's start with the founder side. Like, for any founders who are looking to join an accelerator, I would say if you are a first time founder, borderline second time founder, you don't have a massive network, you're looking for a co-founder, you're looking for capital, go and join an accelerator. It's 12 weeks, and realistically, you don't actually have much to lose. You're either going to get the money or you're not. You build a great network, and this is what Handler's very good at. You build a great network of people. They install like a DNA on you, like this is actually how to build a company, and hopefully you learn a lot. And if you don't raise money, then you can go somewhere else. So that's what I would say from like the founder's point of view. From the accelerators itself point of view, in Southeast Asia, there probably aren't. There are quite a few, but from like notable names, there are not that many. What they do really well, they're very good at positioning themselves as how every accelerator does. Come and join an accelerator XYZ. The content itself, like 12 weeks to actually find a co-founder, is very hard, and I don't think that's what people understand enough of. It's you've basically got 12 weeks to build a company, find a co-founder, and get your first customers. Get as much possible done before you go and raise money. The selection process is very hard. So like at IC, at the end of the 12 weeks, everyone goes to IC. That's when you like decide to go and raise money or not. The accelerator model in general is very hard. Like we were saying before we came on live, like it's very OpEx heavy, especially those programs which are in person versus not. You got in reality quite a small team supporting a lot of founders. So you probably have a team of no more than 5 to 10 in each location supporting 60 to 100 founders, and that's a lot. And just like deciding which companies to invest in is very hard. These companies are nothing. They're literally 12 weeks old. So you're betting on the founders. That's it. And the market potential. And, it's been sad to see like, yeah, a lot of accelerators have unfortunately closed down. It's a really hard model. And And from my point of view, similar to what we spoke about before we came on, there are two accelerator models. You can have the in-person model, like Andler, like Techstars, all around the world, where you have hundreds of people, quite OpEx heavy, um, and just quite hard to do. Or you can have um, the regional type accelerators where you have all the founders in one place. So it's maybe if you do in Europe, you only have one accelerator in London 2 or 3 times a year, and all of the founders must come to London. That's it. And you can probably still invest in the same amount of founders if you do it that model versus the complete like global perspective. So yeah, I would say that those are the learnings and challenges like from running accelerator. It's really hard. It takes 10 years to really figure out if you've got some good companies or not. A couple of the accelerators in the region have. What's lacking? I would say more accelerators in these emerging markets. I would say Thailand is an emerging market from the accelerator and startup ecosystem point of view. Same with like Cambodia. If we go to like the likes of like Taiwan, Korea, Japan, all of these have like amazing entrepreneurial ecosystems. They're just very few accelerators there. How about you guys? What are you saying? You're also on the ground in Cambodia. What's happening, and what do you want to see changing?
Yeah, I think no, yeah. In general, I would say like if you're going to these more like let's say frontier or like very much emerging countries, there is this benefit to really being on the ground and like building those networks. But yeah, I mean, I think there is also this like model where, as you said, like it's all done in one place, right? You either go to Singapore, I think like iterative, they go to Bali, like things like that. So I think that can work from like a regional level. But then yeah, there is a benefit to having these more like localized accelerators. But yeah, I mean, as you say, like even if even if you have like 100 million under management, which is pretty decent size for a VC, that the management fee would be 2 million or so. So of course you can build a decent team with that, but like you were saying, like hundreds of people, you can see how that does get a bit complicated. It's really just that you're waiting for those performance fees and those exits to come through. What about you? What do you think about exits in Southeast Asia? Do you see, like, has it surprised you kind of where it is, or would you expect it to be further along, or what do you think?
Yeah, I was looking at this a couple of days ago. Singapore is obviously one of the leading markets for exits. We'd love to see more happening, across Southeast Asia, but I think a lot of it just comes back down to being sensible on what's kind of happening in the ecosystem, right? How fast are these companies getting to exit? One of the blockers I see happening, especially like in Europe and US, if you're exiting for a couple of $1 billion plus, it's got to go through regulation, it's got to go for approval. Well, then as a founder, realistically, by the time you get to that kind of unicorn status, you probably only still have maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 20% max. Or you can go down, exiting for a couple $100 million. You probably still own, 40 to 50% of the company. And you can do that in 3 to 5 years. So I think as a founder and those being acquired, it really depends like the route you want to go down. It's probably better and slightly easier to go down the route of exiting for a couple $100 million. You don't need to go through that approval process, and it's faster to get done. Of course, like we'd love to see more happening. The M&A activity, I haven't spent too much time on, but yeah, maybe you guys have some more interesting perspectives.
Yeah, are there any particular countries in the region that you're like, I mean, there's always the consensus countries, right? Like Vietnam and Indonesia, Singapore, but any sort of breakthrough economies or places that you're sort of looking at more so?
I think South Korea is really interesting to watch. There are actually a number of VCs that there are a number of like investment houses, something like 10,000 investment houses and VC arms in South Korea. And just like the region there, like is hustling. There are tons of founders. It's a really cool ecosystem. So I would say South Korea is one to watch. Of course, there are challenges and stuff. But just from being on the ground there for some time, is a founder entrepreneurial culture that's soon to explode.
And
How
do
about
you
you
feel?
guys? What are you seeing?
Yep. Sorry. Yeah. So for I think for right now, a lot of what we've focused on, at least on the Satori Giant side, has been around the creator economy. It's actually mostly in Cambodia, a lot of interesting developments in the logistics sector, especially in last mile. So, uh, for us on our side, we invested in a company called Gelat. They're basically using a tech-enabled solution to help with the last mile. And given that there really weren't postal codes that were initially available in Cambodia or in Phnom Penh, really. So it's interesting to check out what are the current problems within like within the city that founders are going towards and trying to fix and solve for. And logistics, for example, is one that we found particularly interesting, at least within Cambodia. So
Yeah, I think this whole ecosystem is going to be interesting, but maybe even taking a step back, you've got the M&A market, the access market on the very far right side, but then it always comes back down to like the emerging ecosystem, right? How these founders get started. And I actually think in Southeast Asia, more globally alone, what we're going to see a lot more of are these former operators starting their own funds. We call them like solo GPs, micro funds. They're very specialized. They're very niche. So if you worked at marketplaces, maybe you're going to raise a $10-20 million marketplaces fund and just become the best in that industry. We actually did a piece a few weeks ago, maybe it was last month now, on the solo GP landscape and basically mapped out all the solo GPs in the space. And I think it's just really interesting seeing these former operators who are arguably actually more valuable to have on your cap table in the early days versus a VC who doesn't have that operator founding experience. We're going to see a lot more of that. We're going to see a lot more operators starting their own companies. Part of my time at Anda was building up this operators network, which basically became like one of the biggest in VC. And these were, your heads of product, heads of marketing, heads of sales, all the top 500 tech companies globally. And a number of them were at least at the time exploring how to start their own company or joining a slightly early stage company. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that. And the ecosystem is always evolving. AI is big right now. And we're all here to help each other.
would you say just quickly on the solo GP, what would you say is the typical size of these funds that the solo GP raises, and do they stay within the sectors that they built in, or would you say that in a way, thinking of it from like a flywheel perspective, where let's say the founder may have had an exit, they decide to reinvest within whether it be that space or maybe more so the country.
Yeah. So yeah, from the solo GPs that I've seen anyway, most of them are anywhere from $10 to $35 million for a first time fund. If you're obviously a stellar founder and you've got a huge track record, you can raise a lot more than that. But typically is that $10 to $35 million. And in terms of the investment thesis where these former operators turned solo GPs are turning into or investing in, it varies. Some of them only stick into their niche where they've just had the most experience. We've seen a couple of gaming operators launching their own gaming funds, fintech operators launching their fintech funds. That's your niche. Like, that industry inside and out, and you know where the biggest opportunities are. And that's where you can build your brand. Like, similar to what we talked about earlier about building new economies, is your niche, make it to the biggest and the best. And if you're a fintech expert and you don't know a huge amount about D2C, why are you investing in D2C? So I think most of them will stay within their niche. Some of them would invest in anything and keep it quite diverse.
Got it. Got it. And for yourself, if you weren't doing what you were doing today, what do you think you would be doing?
Oh, wow. Good question. I've always loved television broadcasting. I've done a few things on television before, and I think I would probably be some form of television presenter, either as a daytime television presenter or some form of like Bloomberg business technology correspondent or something.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
cool. And when you were in your early days when you were doing the Maker podcast, did you ever feel a sense of imposter syndrome at all in those early days when speaking with some of these CEOs, founders of large companies, or was it more so that you let the curiosity and an intelligence aspect be more of the driver versus the maybe the nervousness of talking to someone that's theoretically in like this founder position,
Yeah,
especially
I
young in your career?
yeah, I think you're always thinking, what if this happens or if this doesn't happen? You're always thinking about these things, and I think that's good to have. And even today, you're still thinking, how do we just become bigger and better, right? So I guess that, yeah, imposter syndrome is always there. Um, but I'm also a big believer. Like, I personally live in today, not tomorrow. Like today, I might die tomorrow. You can't live yesterday, so you got to live in today, and you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So like, that's just like my personal personality. But I think it's good to have both. But I think it's also, I think a lot of creators, founders, they worry too much. Don't worry about things until it actually happens. And maybe you guys see that with founders as well.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. We do see that.
Yeah.
You and Max go pretty far back from what I
Just a
understand.
few
So
years.
just a few years. What is there any moment or memory that you have with Max that you kind of look back on and laugh, or like to tell a story, or anything that would be fun to
Well,
share?
this is a podcast, so I think we have to keep it slightly perspective. God, that's a good question. Okay, so I think maybe actually, Max, you should go first, and then I know like how extreme, how nice, how polite you're going to go.
Well, no, I'd say okay. Yeah, I mean, one interesting thing is, yeah, we we said we tried out this startup together, right? We did this thing, me and Ollie. When I was at university at the time, I felt like there wasn't like localized marketplaces at universities where you could just buy and sell stuff. Like textbooks, anything you can buy in your dorm, right? Textbooks, bean bags, whatever has someone gets in their college
Lava
dorm or whatever.
lamps, yeah,
Yeah,
nothing else
exactly. Like
necessary.
just stuff like that. And so, but you'd have a few, like there was like Facebook marketplaces a little bit, but so we thought, okay, we should just do this like we should just do this like localized to university. So we tried it, and we're doing UK, US, and we were trying to build these like ambassadors at each university, and then we were working with this. It's funny because back in the day, we'd work these website designers that you'd talk to back in. I mean, I can't remember his name. Do you remember, Ollie?
I remember Chris
There
Wilcox.
you go. And it was that it was that time when you didn't have Wix, right? And so like, or you didn't have Squarespace, Wix, whatever. And so you'd have to like email him like, I need this page changed to this and this and this and this. And it's just so like it just makes you think like how complicated it was back then, like having this website designer. Yeah.
It was quite a cool idea, though. Basically, like think of Amazon, but instead of getting it the next day, you can get it in an hour or 2 hours for university textbooks or just things you have in your dorm room, right? But yeah, those were the days. But that was cool. And then we also went to school together. So unfortunately, or fortunately, I had the
Yeah.
pleasure of seeing Max every day. But no, I think just on it's just also really nice seeing, like, I think how far we've progressed, and thought we met each other in Cambodia, right, last year.
Yep.
Before I fractured my jaw.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, it was literally the first day of rain in Cambodia, and yeah, just some slippery stairs. It got a bit
Different says
unlucky.
that ended up in a fractured jaw, but that's okay. It's all smiling
Healed
today.
well. Healed well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
It's all smiling today. Cambodian dentist. Wow, amazing job.
Yeah.
Looks better now. But no, in serious, like, it's been amazing to see, I think, just how far you guys both come in such a short period of time, and yeah, let's see kind of where we'll go next.
Yeah, that is yeah, that's I think over the next year it's gonna be a lot of energy and excitement. So really looking forward to it. And Ollie, it's been great having you on the show. Our traditional closing question that we do like to ask each of our guests is, what's the most important piece of advice that you've ever been given?
Don't listen to the dream stealers because they're always going to take your negative energy away. Just focus on being the best.
Yeah.
Bear Grylls said that to me when I spoke to him probably 5 or 6 years ago, and it's resonated with me ever since.
Love that. Love that. Well, you know what? It's been an awesome podcast today. Thank you for taking the time, Ollie. We've really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed it, especially getting to know yours and Max's relationship as you guys go, basically their day one. So
yeah.
I
feel sorry for you. I feel sorry for you having to work with him every day. Is he quite nice?
Yeah, of course. Every day. We have good banter. So
that's good.
Yeah, we also have another English, Scottish. We have a Scot on the team, so there's always a healthy amount of banter and taking the mickey, as we say. It's not taking life too seriously.
Scottish versus English. Well, I'm half Scottish. I can't really say anything, but lucky you, Dom.
Yeah, you know what? I sit back and I like to just listen. I don't understand half the things that are being said, but I just like to listen. So
yeah, the British like lingo, which is like one-liners. You'll get used to us. Don't worry.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah. It's been 4 years now. I think I'm getting close. So
that's good. But on that note, if anyone hasn't subscribed to Rising Giants, this is not a ad. You should. Dom and Max do a great job, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, and don't forget to go on New Economies on Substack and give Ollie another subscriber. He will have got over 6 during this podcast, so that's great.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. But no, thank you so much for having me on. Awesome work and all the best for you guys, and just do it.
Thanks very much.
Awesome.
Okay, great.
Thank you.